100 engineers couldn't fix it, but this janitor's 10-minute trick shocked everyone. There it was, the unsolvable problem that had devoured time and energy in a bustling city. The huge metal door, 10 feet high and made of rusty steel, stood defiantly closed. 100 skilled engineers had gathered, their voices rising with frustration. They threw their hands in the air, scratching their heads, staring at complex blueprints under flickering fluorescent lights. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said it was cursed, while others whispered about strange noises echoing from behind that door. But then, out of nowhere, a janitor shuffled into view. He was just an old guy, a little bent over with age, broom in hand, but the way he moved was oddly confident. The crowd fell silent, looking at him like he was a ghost. "What can he do that we can't?" someone mumbled. Those who watched felt a strange mix of skepticism and anticipation, like a pitch-black night before a thunderstorm. Then, the janitor approached the door, his eyes sparkling with secrets. He didn't pull out fancy tools. No crowbars or electric gadgets, just a simple piece of string. The crowd leaned in closer, their hearts racing, not sure if they were experiencing a comedy or a miracle. With the tension high, the janitor tied the string to the handle. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "That's it?" Someone sneered, but the janitor just smiled. He took a knee and whispered something. The words floated away like an incantation, barely audible. A minute felt like an eternity. The crowd held its breath, waiting, hearts thumping against their ribs. And then nothing happened. Silence fell heavier than lead. A collective sigh, a whisper of disappointment. But just as they were about to disperse, the door shuddered. The sudden noise sent chills down everyone's spine. "No way!" a woman shouted, jumping back. The janitor stood firm, his face betraying a flicker of triumph. He pulled the string again, and with an almost supernatural grace, the door creaked open, revealing a darkness that seemed to swallow the very light around it. A musty smell erupted, like ancient secrets evading the world. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The crowd was stunned. Whispers of awe danced among them, each person trying to comprehend what was unfolding. Who was this janitor? How on earth did he do it? As they peered into the shadowy void, anticipation gripped them. What lay beyond that threshold? Perhaps a treasure? Or something far darker? The janitor looked back at them, a glimmer of mischief in his eyes. Something was stirring, and they were right on the edge of an extraordinary discovery. Once the door lurched open, it revealed not just darkness, but a chilling silence that seemed sentient, ready to swallow anyone brave enough to step inside. A thick, damp mist rolled out, curling around the feet of onlookers like ghostly fingers, each breath filled with unease. The crowd shuffled back instinctively, unease etched across their faces. "What's in there?" a voice quivered from the back. The engineers exchanged perplexed glances, their once sure confidence now wavering. The janitor, however, stood resolute, absorbing the shock of the moment like a seasoned performer. His face was calm, almost playful, as if the door's opening was merely the punchline to a long-anticipated joke. "Go on." He beckoned with an inviting wave of his hand, revealing the depths behind the door. "It won't bite unless you're afraid of what you might find." Then, taking a deep breath, fueled by a mad mixture of curiosity and adrenaline, a young engineer named Mark stepped forward. With each stride, the crowd watched, breaths held tight in their chests. He was determined to discover the secret that had eluded 100 minds. The darkness ahead seemed to pulse, as if beating in time with his heart. As Mark crossed the threshold, the air grew colder. It felt electric. Shadows darted about, uncertain shapes shifting just out of reach. The janitor stayed by the door, a small smile playing on his lips even as the ominous atmosphere thickened. The tension in the air was palpable. Time seemed to freeze for a heartbeat before the first sound erupted from within the shadows. A low, guttural growl rumbled through the chamber, sending a thunderous echo that bounced off the walls. The crowd gasped in unison, their fears surfacing like panic-stricken tides. Mark paused, a look of panic mingling with determination on his face. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else, but curiosity got the better of him. He fished out his flashlight, its beam cutting through the shadows and illuminating the walls. To his shock, they weren't made of cold, harsh steel. No, they were lined with strange symbols, pulsating faintly as though they had a heartbeat of their own. They seemed to write a forbidden language across the room, a warning or perhaps a beckoning. "Hey!" the janitor shouted, interrupting Mark's trance. "You don't want to go too deep. The further you go, the more the less you return." "What do you mean?" Mark called back, the flashlight wavering as he edged closer to decipher the symbols. The crowd was frozen, caught between terror and intrigue, unsure of whether to follow or retreat. The janitor's eyes narrowed, casting a shadow as he leaned in close. There are things in this world that are meant to stay hidden and things that belong to the dark. Suddenly, Mark felt an oppressive weight pressing against him, a swirling energy that twisted the air around him. The symbols on the walls flared brighter, illuminating the fear in his eyes. He staggered back, the flashlight flickering. The crowd loomed closer, still unsure whether to rush in or pull him out. As Mark stumbled back into the light, the door began to shudder, slamming shut with a deafening clang. The janitor laughed, but it wasn't a joyful sound, it was more like a warning bell ringing in the desperate air. "What?" someone cried, as if awakening from a dreadful nightmare. "What's behind there?" With the door sealed, Mark's heart raced as he recalled the janitor's words. There were things meant to stay hidden. The crowd surged with questions, urgency crackling like electricity in the air. What had he seen? What had he awoken? The janitor stood tall, watching the panic unfold as if waiting for a storm to break. "Let me tell you what happens when you dig too deep," he said ominously. But could they dare to listen? The mystery deepened, and the next chapter unfolded like a whisper in the dark. What secrets would be revealed? What would that darkness decide to unleash? The crowd stood in a stunned silence, eyes glued to the sealed door. It towered like a sentry, holding secrets that danced just beyond the veil of comprehension. Murmurs broke out, frantic whispers woven with threads of fear. "We have to get him out." Someone shouted, but uncertainty gripped them, chaining their feet to the ground. "Mark, are you okay?" A voice rang through the turmoil, but there was no answer. Instead, the shadows behind the door seemed to pulse in response, beckoning like a siren-esque call. A few brave souls poked their heads closer, but the janitor raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low and steady. "What's locked away can't just be walked into casually." His expression turned serious, eyes boring into the crowd as he weighed each person, gauging their resolve. "What did you mean when you said the deeper you go?" One engineer ventured, stepping closer despite the danger that seemed to thicken the air around them. The janitor took a step forward, leaning against the wall that kept them separated from the mysteries within. "There are realms that shouldn't be trifled with. Once curiosity leads you down that path, the return ticket disappears." His gaze flickered toward the door, as if imagining the unspeakable horrors that lay behind it. Mark pressed himself against the door frame, trying to catch glimpses of the symbols. Each pulse of light drew him closer, his insatiable curiosity pushing against the warnings echoing in his mind. "I have to know," he muttered under his breath, shaking off an involuntary shiver. "Mark." The crowd was lunging, people scrambling to reach out to him, half wanting to pull him back and half wanting to follow. Their hearts raced, torn between fear and the allure of the unknown. "Stay put!" he shouted, adrenaline surging through him. Just then, the guttural growl roared again, more furious this time, echoing like a thunderstorm trapped within the walls. The air vibrated with it, rattling Mark's bones as dread surged. "That's it!" the janitor exclaimed, his tone urgent. "You must leave. Whatever that is, it doesn't want visitors." But Mark stood, rooted by a mixture of fear and excitement. The symbols flickered, black and white, red and gold, each rhythm creating a visual drumbeat against the oppressive darkness. And then, almost as if in response to Mark's audacity, a low rumble erupted from the shadows, vibrating through the ground. The crowd gasped again, a wave of panic rippling outward. "Get back!" someone shouted, eyes wide as another engineer nearly stumbled forward, but Mark was entranced. He moved closer, his heart racing, dim light falling on the secrets written in the eerie script. He felt the barriers of fear start to crack. As he did, an unsettling hush descended, pressing down like the weight of 1,000 regrets. Suddenly, the glow intensified, illuminating something moving among the symbols. A dark figure slinked through the shadows, undulating like smoke, almost sentient. Mark's breath caught in his throat. Was it watching him? "Come back!" The janitor's voice cut through the silence, laced with panic. "You're in over your head." But the shadowy figure solidified, becoming clearer, its eyes gleaming like dying stars. A chill shot through Mark. If this was what lay hidden, how dire was the truth waiting to pull him in. Just then, an explosive bang echoed from the door, a sound more like a heartbeat thundering against a fragile chest. The crowd recoiled, backpedaling, almost in unison, as the janitor shouted again, "You can't let it out. Whatever you do, don't let it out." Mark's heart raced, locked in a battle of instincts, flee or confront. The obscured figure flickered once more, a tempest swirling within, and Mark realized darkness had its own designs, and he might have just ignited something dangerous. As the door rattled again, a crack formed, wide enough for shadows to spill into the light. The crowd, now backing away in sheer horror, exchanged frantic glances, fear sharpening every expression. What lay within beckoned with an unmistakable grim allure, threatening to pull him in. What would he find when the door finally cracked open fully? The flickering eye of fate watched, waiting. Would Mark be the key to release? Or the last flame extinguished in the dark? The door quivered violently, rattling its rusty frame as though whatever lay beyond was desperately trying to escape. Mark's breath hitched. He felt a primal urge to retreat, but an invisible thread tugged him forward, electrifying his veins. "Mark, this is insane!" someone shouted, voice trembling in the thick air. People were pulling at one another, back chains of anxiety tightening their resolve to flee. The janitor cursed under his breath, eyes staring wide as he scanned the crowd. "You're all fools to stand here. There's no telling what will come out." His body was tense, ready to act, and Mark knew he wasn't the only one feeling the pressure spiral out of control. With each new crack in the door, a pulse of light shot out, illuminating the faces of the anxious crowd. Fear had changed the scene. Their eyes were pools of terror, fixed on the impending chaos. Mark, however, felt utterly absorbed in the marionette show between the shadows, the pull of the unknown singing in his bones. The shadows within the door swirled faster, dark tendrils venturing just beyond the boundary, flickering momentarily as if testing the thin line between light and shadow. Each flicker brought with it a whisper, soft yet suffocating, as though they whispered promises of untold power and secrets that could change everything. "Don't!" shouted a woman at Mark, her face a mask of horror. "You don't know what you're dealing with." But how could he turn away when the promise of truth danced before him? He drew closer to the door, pulse hammering in his ears, drowning out all reason. The engraved symbols cast a mesmerizing glow, details revealing themselves like winding paths in a dark forest. Everything else fell away. He was no longer a person surrounded by a crowd, he was simply a part of the shadows now. A loud crash erupted as the door blasted open, the force of it sending a wave of unseen energy exploding outward. Mark reeled, catching himself against the cold wall, eyes trained on the chaos that spilled forth. A figure lunged from the darkness, clearer now, moving in shifts that seemed to defy the very nature of reality. The janitor shouted something, but Mark could hardly hear him over the rise of a new sound, a low, monstrous growl, reverberating through his chest. A storm of dread swept through the crowd, panic igniting like wildfire, people shrieking as they stumbled back. But the figure now palpable, defined, shimmered with an otherworldly energy, its eyes fiery holes consuming the dim light. The air crackled, thick with tension, as if reality itself had started to bend. The crowd surged and fell, people jostling for space, hearts racing, minds screaming with adrenaline. Mark stood alone while the world around him fractured. He watched, eyes wide, mesmerized as the looming figure turned to face him. It wasn't the aggression that flickered in those smoldering eyes, it was something deeper, more intimate and knowing, an invitation. Mark, it echoed, a voice echoing in his mind, smooth as silk yet sharp as a knife. The world shrunk. Only he and the figure remained, the chaos fading into the background. Words weren't needed, it was a beckoning, an entangling connection that drew him closer. The janitor rushed forward, arms outstretched, desperately trying to pull him back. Get away from it. You'll never come back. But Mark was lost in the gaze of the darkness, swaying helplessly, feeling the pull of something ancient and powerful coursing through him. With each step he took, a sensation bubbled inside, proclaiming that some doors were more than just barriers. They were thresholds. As the last spark of light faded into the chasm, Mark stood on the precipice, one final breath hanging in the silence. Did he dare to leap into the unknown? He felt the weight of choice loom. The whispers beckoned, now louder, more insistent, and just as he took a step forward, the ground below him shook violently, the world spinning at dizzying speeds as the door widened further. Just then, a sudden silence fell. Mark caught a glimpse of something terrifying, a glimpse of eternity, and he knew the scales of reality were about to tip. This was no longer about his curiosity. Something else was awakening, and it was hungry. What lay beyond wasn't just a secret, it was a hunger that would consume everything in its path. Would Mark become its first sacrifice? Or would he find a way to control it? Something monumental was about to unfurl. The earth trembled beneath Mark's feet, the ground vibrating with a primal energy that seemed to reach out and grab his ankles. He didn't know whether to run or stand still, but deep inside, something woke, something ancient and powerful. It was as if the air itself shifted, thickening around him with every heartbeat. He looked over his shoulder, panic seeping in as the crowd scrambled backward like a wave crashing onto the shore, retreating from the chaos unleashed. The janitor's shout rang clear in his ears, "Hold on." But the encouragement felt like a distant echo, overshadowed by the growl emerging from the open door. It was a sound unlike anything he had heard before, a guttural promise wrapped in echoes of forgotten sorrows. Mark faced the figure, still locked in that magnetic gaze, each second stretching like an eternity. The crowd became a backdrop of horror, mere shadows flitting in and out of focus as he stood on the brink of something unimaginable. There was a weight in the air, a burden of choices not yet made, and they fell heavy on his chest. Mark, the figure's voice slithered into his mind, soothing and terrifying all at once. You are meant for this. For a moment, he felt exposed, like an astronaut stepping into the vastness of space, and his spirit wrestled with the thrill of possibility. Thoughts of home, of familiar faces flashed through him, his mother's gentle smile, his sister's laughter. Yet, tethered between those memories was a desperate want to know what lay beyond the mundane, a craving for understanding, even if it meant trading every piece of himself for it. The whispers grew urgent, now swirling in a cacophony of voices, demanding. Join us, join us. They seeped into the crevices of his mind, burrowing deeper, brushing against long-buried dreams and fears. In that moment, clarity struck. This was no mere curiosity, this was a crossroads. But beyond that realization loomed another grim question. What price would he pay? His heart thundered, adrenaline flooding his veins. Mark looked to the crowd, still panicking, desperation reflected in their eyes. Would they follow? The floor quaked again, and behind the figure, tendrils of shadow began to pulse and writhe, reaching out as if to snatch him away. Mark swallowed hard, feeling a lump form in his throat. What are you? He managed, voice shaking, but strong enough to pierce through the chaos. A smile creased the features of the figure, a smile that wasn't a smile at all. I am what you seek and so much more. The shadows flared brighter, wrapping around it like a cloak. Just as he was about to step forward, to leap into the unknown, the janitor pushed through the crowd, desperation fueling his movements. You can't let it take you, Mark. His voice cracked, raw with fear. Fight it. You're stronger than this. A spark flickered in Mark's mind. Could he truly fight it? His feet shifted, instinctively pulling back against the unseen force, but the figure pressed forward, its energy like a riptide pulling him closer. The pull dragged at the edges of his consciousness, trying to sink him into an abyss that whispered sweetly of power and knowledge. Behind him, the crowd began to chant incoherently, the panic morphing into a collective mantra. They were urging him, don't go. Don't go. Yet, it was too late. The fabric of the world twisted around him, time collapsing, and Mark found himself caught in a riptide of shadow and light. That he ripped his gaze from the insatiable darkness and shouted against the din, stop. You don't understand. But the voices drowned him out, an echoing reminder of everything he knew well but didn't comprehend anymore. Then everything surged, the figure lunged, breaking through the threshold of reality and into his soul. It felt like a surge of electricity, both horrific and exhilarating. In that very instant, vision blurred, colors bled together, and Mark felt a new weight settle deep within. The choice was made. And just then, silence reigned again, this time different, pregnant with expectation. The ground felt steady, the shadows retreated, and all eyes were on him. What had he unleashed? What now lived inside him, pulsating and waiting? As the crowd held its breath, one question clawed its way back to the surface: would Mark's choices forge a path of illumination or a descent into darkness? The figure loomed back within him, forming an alliance he couldn't yet understand. But something more was stirring, and it wasn't finished with him. The energy crackled in the air, weighed down by the tension that hung like a heavy fog. Mark's heart raced, every beat echoing like a drum pounding against the silence. He could feel the crowd's panic intertwining with his own confusion, their fear tangible as they watched him with wide, frightened eyes. Mark. The janitor's voice cut through the haze, a desperate plea amidst the chaos. You're not alone in this. In that instant, Mark felt the pull of both worlds, the lingering shadows beckoning him toward powerful secrets and the throbbing warmth of human connection reminding him what was at stake. The figure inside him simmered, a dark promise curling like smoke, whispering of forbidden knowledge. Fight it. Focus on who you are. The janitor urged. His face was a mixture of anguish and determination, hands raised as if trying to grasp Mark's fractured reality. That's when Mark realized the truth. There was a part of him, fierce and unyielding, that rejected the shadows that clawed for dominance. He thought of his mother and sister again. Those joyful memories were anchors in this storm of uncertainty. Fuel surged within him, knitting together the fragments of his splintered resolve. The whispers churned around him, thickening, mocking, "You can't resist us. Join us." They poured into his ears like a flood, drowning out his thoughts, yet he pushed back with a shout that came from deep within. No. I want to let you in. The crowd's murmur shifted, an undercurrent of hope igniting in their shared uncertainty. He felt them rallying behind him, a collective heartbeat grounding him. Mark gave a fierce glance to the figure, its shadows flickering as if in surprise. Embrace your power, Mark. The chant of the crowd rose, weaving through the chaotic energy, a defiant song against despair. Embrace the light. With that surge of encouragement, Mark's eyes blazed with newfound determination. He clenched his fists tight, focusing on the ground beneath him, the coolness of the tiles reminding him of reality. The figure before him shifted, uncertain, as he straightened, his resolve igniting with the intensity of his voice. "I am not what you say I am." The shadows recoiled, an affronted hiss that reverberated through the space. Tendrils of darkness quivered and shrank away from Mark, retreating in fear, and the palpable energy around him morphed from foreboding chaos to vibrant clarity. Suddenly, from behind him, there was a wayward glimmer. A small object catching the light. Was it the janitor's cleaning cart? In his haste to confront the figure, Mark felt a pull toward it, drawn like a moth to a flame. What if his answer lay in the simplest of tools, tucked away in the forgotten corners of this nightmarish encounter? "Mark, the broom!" The janitor shouted, urgency lacing his tone. The connection snapped fiercely into focus. He lunged toward the cart, fingers gripping the sturdy handle of the broom. It seemed absurd, yet something within him pulsed with wisdom he didn't fully understand. Holding it high, he could see it now as a weapon, a symbolic act of defiance against the darkness. "Leave! Now!" he bellowed, summoning every ounce of strength within him. The crowd gasped, fear colliding with awe. The figure hesitated, shadows swirling like a tempest. "You think that will stop me?" it hissed, but the taunt held a tinge of uncertainty. What would happen next? Would the broom truly wield enough power to push back the creeping shadows? Could it shatter the illusion and let light flood into the void? Mark drew a deep breath, all eyes upon him, waiting for a spark of hope in this chaos. Would this simple act lead to salvation, or was it merely a delay before darkness engulfed them all? He tightened his grip, heart racing, and took a step forward, ready to confront not just the figure but the very shadows lurking within himself as well. The air thickened as the moment stretched. Everything hinged on his next move. Would he unlock a new truth, or was it all about to collapse? The moment stretched agonizingly, as if time itself held its breath. Mark's heart pounded, the noise of the crowd fading into a murmur. He focused on the figure looming before him, its jagged edges shifting like an angry tide, dark and slippery. "Leave!" he repeated, his voice gaining strength, resonating through the gathered throng. With every inch of resolve pushing against the shadows, he raised the broom high, a beacon in the growing dark. Each fiber of his being screamed for liberation from the malevolent entity that sought to dominate him. A ripple ran through the crowd. They leaned in, collective breath suspended, eyes wide and shining with a mixture of fear and hope. The janitor stood steadfast, his gaze unwavering, reinforcing Mark's shaky courage with an unspoken bond. The figure twisted, shadows recoiling slightly as if struck, its voice dripping with disdain. "You think such a mundane tool can harm me? Your memories are pathetic, just as you are." Mark's fingers tightened around the broom handle until his knuckles turned white. Pathetic? No. Those memories were his lifelines, grounding him amid the tempest of chaos. He thought of laughter spilling through the kitchen, the warmth of hugs that lingered long after they ended. He thought of the people who depended on him. In that heartbeat of clarity, he understood the broom wasn't just an object. It was a symbol, the embodiment of every person who fought against despair, every spirit that stood defiantly against shadows. "Maybe I am just a kid," Mark shouted, stepping forward with purpose. "But even the smallest light can push back the darkness." He swung the broom, the wooden handle connecting with the air, producing a sharp whoosh, more powerful in intent than physicality. The figure shrieked. The sound shattered the oppressive silence, a discordant chord vibrating through the crowd. Shadows recoiled, momentarily faltering as if scalded by an unseen flame. "That's it, Mark. Don't stop!" the janitor shouted. His voice melded with the swelling roar of encouragement from the onlookers. Every clap, every shout infused Mark with greater strength. Fueled by the collective energy surrounding him, Mark charged forward, broom held high. Each step felt like a victory against the encroaching dread. The figure writhed, more desperate now, shadows swirling erratically. "Do you really think you can cleanse me away with a sweeping motion?" It seethed, dread and anger twisting its form. Maybe not, Mark shot back, his spirit ignited. But I can refuse to let you take me. With a fierce sweep, he sent the broom across the ground. It connected with the darkness, a bright streak against the inky void like a comet racing through the night sky. Light burst forth from the broom's tip, illuminating the space in bright, blinding waves. The crowd gasped, eyes shining like stars reflecting on a lake. But the darkness would not yield easily. It lunged, reaching tendrils extending towards Mark, a desperate grasp for his unraveling fears. Tightness gripped his throat, strangling any flicker of doubt. He pushed it back with all his might, all the love and joy he'd ever known pulsing through him like a heartbeat. In the chaos, Mark felt the connection to the janitor strengthen like a lifebuoy tossed into turbulent seas. Together, they were a force, united against the abyss, but the shadows fought back, a darkness heavier than he could fathom, enveloping the room in a chilling embrace. Whispered threats curled around him like smoke, slithering into his mind. You will never win. You don't have the power. Watch me. Mark shouted, as he pulled the broom back, preparing for one final swing, a final stand against the unknown. The moment was electric, saturated with uncertainty. Would this be his moment of triumph, or would it signal an end veiled in hopelessness? As Mark charged, propelled by determination, something unexpected happened. The shadows flickered, hesitating for just a heartbeat. Mark could feel the weight of the crowd's anticipation pressing against him like an old weightlifting belt. It was a tension so thick he could almost taste it, sharp and metallic. Then, something shifted in the void. A burst of smoke formed around the looming figure, and for a fleeting moment, Mark saw it, something not fully formed, as if the shadows themselves struggled against a hidden force, a fight for reality. The thing's face contorted, a mask of fury and fear, as if it realized it was losing ground. It was now or never, with a ferocity that echoed through his very soul. Mark swung the broom with everything he had. The bristles sliced through the darkness as if parting a sea of nightmares. Light erupted in a stunning flash, bathing the room in a pale glow that pushed back the malevolent figure. It screeched a terrible, clawing sound and writhed in protest against the warmth, its form unraveling like black smoke caught in a breeze. Don't stop. Keep going. The janitor roared, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. Mark found strength in the cry, fueling the defiance that burned in his chest. He swung the broom again and again, the rhythmic swish blending with the sounds of cheering encouragement from the crowd. Hope rippled through the air, a tangible force that mingled with the light, but as he pressed on, the darkness began to retaliate. Tendrils lashed out, seeking the fears that had once held him hostage. Each strike stung more than the last, striking at his heart, whispering doubts that echoed painfully within. You'll fall, you don't truly belong here, you're weak. Mark's breaths came fast and shallow, and for a moment, he faltered. The darkness surged, threatening to swallow him whole, the whispers coiling tight around him. He felt a chokehold on his spirit, squeezing out every inch of conviction he had summoned. Mark! The janitor shouted, desperation ringing in his voice, but it was almost lost amidst the upheaval. Remember who you are. In that frantic moment, a memory flared up, a family newspaper clipping, yellowed and worn, showing him as a child, grinning with soft sunlight on his face, nestled between his parents. They were there, proud and smiling down at their little boy, and he realized in a rush, love is light. With a sudden clarity that surged through him, he straightened his back, banishing the claws of fear. You don't own me. He cried, unleashing a wild energy, swinging the broom one last time, hard enough to crack the darkness. In that instant, something inexplicable happened. The shadows seemed to shatter like glass, splintering off, cutting the air with their despair. The light expanded, blindingly bright, engulfing the room in a glowing embrace. The crowd gasped collectively, transfixed as the shadows screamed one final time, bleeding away into the crevices of the past. Freedom swelled in Mark's veins, then silence. As the shards of darkness vanished, an eerie calm settled over the room, leaving only the gentle glow of the broom light. The cheers of the crowd erupted like fireworks, echoing with a jubilant weight. Mark stood panting, heart pounding, the broom still clutched tightly in his hand, but as he turned to face the gathered faces, excitement quickly faded into confusion. The janitor looked past him, eyes wide in sudden realization. "No, it can't be," he exclaimed, staggering backward. Mark frowned, a shiver creeping down his spine. "What is it? What's wrong?" The janitor's gaze locked onto something behind Mark, an expression of deep dread contorting his features. "It's not over yet." Mark turned slowly, dread pooling in his stomach. In the flickering light, shadows began to amass once more, a deep, swirling vortex aligning before his eyes. Panic gripped him as the echoes of laughter turned to gasps, faces frozen in horror like a snapshot of dread. "What do we do now?" he whispered, dread pooling in his gut. The answer hung heavy in the air, and the crowd's excitement morphed into a hushed uncertainty. Shadows thickened, stretching from the corners, creeping back toward the open space between them. Would they face another battle? Or was this just the beginning of something far darker? Even as Mark's heart raced with determination, doubt gnawed at him. How much further could he fight? The shadows twisted and churned like a storm ready to unleash chaos. Mark's heart raced as he faced the oncoming vortex, each beat echoing the doubt sprouting in his mind. This couldn't be happening again. The cheers from before felt like phantoms now, fading amidst the growing terror. "Mark!" The janitor's voice rang out again, slicing through the tension. "We've got to break the circle. Quickly." "Circle?" Mark's voice quivered, panic spilling into his words. He scanned the room, his gaze catching on the gathering of shadows at each corner, their menace pooling together before him like a living thing. "Yes. The shadows thrive on fear and chaos. If we break their connection, we can starve them." The janitor pointed urgently. "Work together. We need to unite our light." Mark bit his lip, glancing at the crowd. Fear reflected in every face, wide eyes and quivering lips. What could he do? They had just fought, and now the battle was reigniting. Could he really lead them again? "Listen." Mark's voice caught a breath from the crowd. "We can't let this darkness swallow us. Remember what we did. Together, we can fight back." Slowly, the crowd shifted, murmurs of hesitant agreement scattered like ripples on water. Mark steeled himself, gripping the broom tightly, its bristles still glowing faintly. "Everyone, repeat after me. Love is light. Love is light." Shaky voices began to echo the phrase. There was hesitation, but it grew, gaining strength. The janitor joined in, projecting his voice with conviction, louder. "Love is light." The shadows shrieked, recoiling slightly as the wave of unified syllables washed over them. Mark's heart leaped with hope, but in that moment of brightness, something deeper shifted behind the vortex. "Mark!" The janitor's urgent warning broke through. "Look!" Mark turned just in time to see a new figure emerge from the whirlpool. Its form was cloaked in layers of shadow, a silhouette exuding an oppressive weight that smothered the hope in the air. The figure's eyes flickered with malevolence, reflecting the gathering fear from the crowd, any remnants of courage dissolving as it approached. "Do you really think you can resist me?" The figure's voice slithered through the air, slick with dark allure, a serpent's whisper curling around their thoughts. "You know pain, you know despair. Why not join me instead?" Mark's stomach dropped. The weight of the figure's voice felt like a hand clenching tightly around his throat. "No!" he shouted, trying to will himself into bravery as he faced the determination of the crowd behind him. "We won't give in." The janitor stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Mark, a resolve carved deep across his weathered face. "You'll never take them. Not while we stand united." As those words left his lips, the shadows around them flickered uncertainly, almost as if they had received a blow. Mark took a deep breath, calling to the energy buzzing among the group. "We have something you don't." Each other. The crowd began repeating the phrase, rising in unison, their voices weaving together like a fabric of light. Mark felt warmth spreading through him, such a rush, a tidal wave of defiance flooding every corner of the room, but just as hope surged, the figure laughed, a spine-chilling sound that made the walls tremble. You think you can change what I am? A new force rises to consume you all. Mark's spine tingled at that threatening tone, fear creeping back in. He glanced at the gathering shadows, and sensed a deep sense of collective dread among the crowd. Fight! The janitor bellowed, snapping Mark back. This is your moment. With renewed energy, Mark screamed, "Love is light," and swung the broom with all his might, directing it towards the swirling depths of the shadows, but the figure stepped forward, blocking their collective warmth, its features morphing into something more menacing, a sneer curled upon its lips. The glow dimmed slightly, like a candle flickering in a windstorm. Mark's heart hammered. What would happen if this didn't work? He needed to rally the group. So he called out, "This isn't about us. It's about fighting for each other. Are we united?" The crowd surged forward passionately, voices flooding the room like a rallying cry. What would come next as shadows threatened to drown out their voices? Would they stand together, or was the darkness truly unstoppable? The room echoed with a fervent urgency as Mark led the crowd, their voices merging into an anthem of hope, a defiant resistance that pushed against the gloom. Love is light. Love is light. The chant swelled, vibrating through the air, wrapping around each figure like a protective shield. Mark felt every word fortify his resolve, igniting the courage that had flickered moments ago. No longer just a solitary fighter, he was part of something grander, something that transcended fear. Yet, the shadowy figure loomed larger before them, its dark tendrils clawing at the light, hungry for despair. You think your petty little chance can save you? It hissed, its voice dripping with contempt. I'll show you despair. But the crowd, now united, responded with an even louder shout. Love is light. The figure recoiled, visibly shaken by the surge of unity. Each word was like a hammer striking against the walls of darkness, reverberating through its intricate web. The janitor stood strong beside Mark, face set with determination. Just a little more, he urged, his voice fierce. Believe in each other. The shadows, once suffocating, trembled at the call of their combined energy. A flicker of light appeared at the center of Mark's heart. He could feel the warmth spreading until it radiated outward, pooling into a bright aura that encircled the crowd. The intensity transformed their fear into conviction, an unbroken chain of resilience. Mark! The janitor called, breaking through the murmur. What do we need to do? Break the circle. Mark cried. Move toward the center. We need to unite our light. He steadied himself, raising the broom high, shining as a beacon. The shadows pulsed around them, relentless but faltering. One by one, the crowd began to step forward, inching closer to Mark, their collective strength building. Unified, they swarmed around him, forming a protective circle, each person holding hands, bolstering each other with whispered encouragements. Mark could feel their hearts aligned, thrumming like a drumbeat, a rhythm of shared hopes and dreams. Now! Mark shouted, and with a powerful swing, he brought the broom down towards the floor. A gust of energy exploded from its tip, cascading outward with a brilliant flash of light that enveloped everything. Love is light. The shadows screamed, a sound like shattering glass as the bristles connected with the ground. Light exploded in waves, crashing against the figure, disassembling it piece by piece. The oppressive weight of despair started to dissolve, flickering into nothingness as shrieks of fury echoed. The crowd erupted with renewed vigor. Together, we are light. They shouted, urging one another on, feeding off the energy surging through the air. With one final flourish, the shadows surrendered, swirling away into the cracks of the building as though the light had absorbed them into its embrace. Silence filled the air, the remnants of darkness fading, leaving only the glow surrounding Mark and the crowd, bright and warm. Then, as if waking from a dream, the energy settled. Mark staggered back, breathless, the broom still held aloft, while the crowd erupted into jubilant cheers. Faces illuminated with triumph and disbelief, smiles broke into laughter. They had battled the abyss and emerged victorious. The janitor stepped forward, pride radiating from him. "You did it, kid." His eyes sparkled with warmth, glistening with unshed emotion. Mark's heart soared, feeling a wave of profound gratitude. It wasn't just me. It was all of us. The crowd cheered again, their voices a tapestry of connected souls celebrating newfound strength. As the echoes of joy wove through the air, Mark knew they had forged a bond that would resonate beyond that moment. They had fought the shadows together, standing against the darkness that sought to consume them. In that instant, beneath the flickering light of hope, Mark felt a parting gift from the experience, the realization that love is indeed light, a force capable of conquering any darkness. Together, they would carry this truth forward, shielded by the connections they had chosen to forge. With that, the janitor slowly began to fade away, his form shimmering like a warm mirage, a proud smile on his lips. "Remember, keep your light bright." And just like that, with the warmth of the sun rising behind them, the figure of the janitor vanished into thin air, leaving behind a legacy of resilience and hope. As they emerged from the remnants of that battle, Mark grasped the broom tighter, glancing around at the community gathered. Each face radiated a spark of light, and he knew they had become more than a group of strangers. They were family, the weight of the past lifted, replaced by vibrant possibilities. They stepped forward into the dawn, ready to face whatever life would offer next together. And now, dear friends, this is where we part. But don't let this story end here. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss any of our future exclusive stories. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about Mark and the janitor. And please, I urge you, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.